Welcome to Unintended Consequences, episode 67. This is a show about what happens when smart, well meaning people try to fix something, and the world fixes back. Marketed as an indestructible shield against fire, asbestos fibers remained in lungs for decades and triggered a slow epidemic of cancer that regulators could not see in time. In 1943, welders at the Brooklyn Navy Yard sprayed a gray, fibrous mixture onto the bulkheads of destroyer escorts. They applied the coating specifically so those ships could survive torpedo hits and engine room fires that might otherwise spread through metal compartments in minutes. The material itself was light enough not to add dangerous weight to the hull, inexpensive to produce at scale, and advertised as a permanent fix that would never need replacement. 30 years later, many of those same workers sat in hospital rooms while doctors explained that the fibers they had breathed in during the war had never left their lungs. Those fibers were now producing mesothelioma tumors that had taken decades to become large enough to detect. Engineers and public health officials in the late 19th and early 20th centuries faced frequent catastrophic fires in factories, theaters, schools, and steamships. Asbestos, already known for its heat resistance since Roman times, offered a practical solution once large-scale mining began in Quebec and South Africa in the 1870s. Companies such as Johns Manville and Turner and Newall promoted the mineral as a way to protect property and save lives. Municipal codes soon required asbestos insulation in new public buildings because the same fibers that refused to burn also refused to conduct heat, promising lower fuel costs for factories and homes. At the time, the only documented hazard was the dust that irritated workers' eyes and throats during installation. That problem was addressed by better ventilation rather than by questioning the material itself, since the visible irritation appeared immediately, while any deeper effects remained invisible for years. Between 1900 and 1970, asbestos was installed in millions of structures across North America and Europe. The U.S. Navy specified it for nearly every vessel built during World War II because the mineral could be sprayed or wrapped around pipes and bulkheads in a single pass. Post-war suburban schools used it in ceiling tiles and pipe lagging because the same durability that survived naval combat also promised decades of fire protection with almost no maintenance. Manufacturers published brochures calling it the miracle mineral and cited its record of preventing boiler explosions and electrical fires. Early medical papers, including a 1907 British report on asbestos factory workers and a 1924 study by Dr. W. E. Cook that named asbestosis, described lung scarring. Those papers were read mainly as occupational hygiene issues that could be solved on the factory floor rather than as signals that the material might remain dangerous long after installation crews had finished their work. By the 1950s, annual global production exceeded 2 million tons, with the United States alone importing roughly 750,000 tons in peak years. The fiber's chemical stability, the very property that made asbestos fireproof, also kept them intact inside lung tissue for 20 to 50 years. Once inhaled, the microscopic needles triggered chronic inflammation that eventually produced asbestosis and, decades later, mesothelioma and lung cancers. Because the diseases appeared long after installation crews had moved on, builders and regulators saw no immediate link between the material and the rising death toll. A 1962 Nature paper by Christopher Wagner and colleagues in South Africa finally tied crocidolite asbestos to mesothelioma clusters, yet widespread use continued for another decade because the connection still looked like a rare occupational problem rather than a broad public health risk. Second-order effects compounded the harm. Firefighters who entered burning buildings wearing protective gear shed fibers into the air they breathed when the gear itself began to degrade. School maintenance workers disturbed ceiling tiles during routine repairs and released new clouds of the same fibers. Family members developed disease from fibers carried home on workers' clothing. Estimates from the World Health Organization and national registries suggest that asbestos-related diseases still claim roughly 40,000 lives worldwide each year, most of them in countries that banned the mineral only after the 1980s. Lawsuits against manufacturers began in earnest in the 1970s. Those suits led to the bankruptcy of Johns Manville in 1982 and the creation of compensation trusts that have paid out more than $30 billion. Most Western nations banned or severely restricted asbestos between 1989 and 2005. Russia, China, and India continued mining and use into the 21st century. Replacement materials such as fiberglass and cellulose insulation carry their own installation hazards, and the cost of removing asbestos from existing buildings has sometimes delayed other safety upgrades. Today, the latency period means new cases continue to appear among people exposed in the 1970s. Legacy installations in older housing stock still require careful management rather than simple removal. When the defining virtue of a material or technology is extreme durability, planners must ask where those durable particles will eventually lodge if they escape their intended setting. Long latency periods between exposure and detectable harm can defeat the feedback loops that normally prompt course corrections. Anyone evaluating a new substance or system should therefore treat persistence itself as a risk factor and insist on early, independent tracking of biological or environmental fate rather than waiting for obvious body counts. The same logic now applies to the long-term behavior of certain modern polymers and chemical additives that resist breakdown in the environment. What early tracking systems would you put in place before widespread adoption? And that's where today's story leaves us. If it changed how you see one everyday decision, that's the whole point. Pass it along to someone who'd appreciate it, and we'll be back tomorrow with another case. And if you'd rather watch than listen, find us on YouTube at NARA Network. Links in the show notes. And before you go, this show is part of the NARA Network, a family of daily podcasts on tech, science, and markets, each one a short, sharp briefing you can finish on the commute. If today earned its place in your feed, here's your next listen, OmniView, a balanced daily world news briefing that takes every side seriously. Find every show free at naranetwork.com. Live dashboards, TSLA, SpaceX launches, the investing scoreboard are all at naranetwork.com/data. This episode used AI voice synthesis of my voice. Editorial selection and analysis are my own.